What starts as a peaceful Christmas walk in a quiet rural village quickly spirals into an unsettling encounter that will send shivers down your spine. If you think you're alone in the woods, think again. It was the evening of Christmas Day, and the air was crisp, filled with the faint smell of pine and frost. My partner and I decided to take a walk, hoping to ease the post-feast sluggishness. Our village is tucked away in the countryside, with only a handful of homes scattered like distant stars. The nearest town is a 10-minute drive, and the edge of the forest is just a short stroll away. It felt like the perfect opportunity for some fresh air, and perhaps a chance to capture some night shots of the woods with my camera. The sun had long set, and darkness enveloped the landscape, broken only by the faint glow of our powerful LED flashlight. The forest stood ahead, an imposing silhouette of dense trees and winding paths. The stillness of the night was both serene and eerie, the kind of quiet that amplifies every rustle of leaves and crunch of gravel underfoot. As we approached the gravel cycle path leading to the forest, a strange feeling began to creep over me. It wasn't fear exactly, but a heightened awareness, the kind you get when you sense something watching you. I shook it off, attributing it to the eerie beauty of the night. We followed the path, which curved gently and bordered the forest's edge. The trees loomed tall and shadowy, their bare branches reaching skyward like skeletal hands. Halfway down the trail, our flashlight beam caught something unusual. A car. It was parked just off the path, partially concealed by the trees. My heart skipped a beat. Cars weren't allowed here, and the gravel path was too narrow for regular traffic. The sight of the vehicle, with its frosted-over windows glinting faintly, was jarring. It looked abandoned, yet the stillness surrounding it felt deliberate, almost menacing. "That's odd," my partner murmured, shining the flashlight directly at the car. The beam revealed no movement inside, just an empty interior and a layer of frost thick enough to suggest it had been sitting there for hours, if not longer. We exchanged uneasy glances. The air felt heavier now, the quietness of the forest suddenly oppressive. Just beyond the car, a peculiar tree caught my eye. Its branches twisted into an almost human-like shape, a haunting silhouette against the backdrop of the forest. I decided to take a few pictures, partly to distract myself from the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. I adjusted my camera settings while my partner illuminated the tree with the flashlight. The first shot captured the gnarled branches in stark detail, but as I lined up the second, my partner's voice broke the silence. There's someone standing behind us." My heart stopped. Slowly, I turned, clutching my camera tightly. Sure enough, just beyond the reach of our flashlight, a figure stood motionless on the path. They were barely visible, their silhouette blending with the shadows of the trees. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there watching us. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Who was this person? Why were they standing there, silently, in the middle of the forest at night? I forced myself to stay calm, though every instinct screamed at me to run. Maybe they were startled, I reasoned. After all, it's not every day you find someone taking photos in the woods after dark. "Hi there," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sorry if we scared you. I was just photographing the tree." The figure didn't respond. They remained utterly still, as though carved from stone. My partner tightened their grip on the flashlight and took a cautious step forward. "Do you need help? Are you lost?" Finally the figure spoke. Their voice was low and flat, devoid of any emotion. "That's not necessary." Something about their tone sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just the words, but the way they were delivered, calm yet unsettlingly detached. I exchanged a glance with my partner, and we silently agreed it was time to leave. We turned and began walking briskly down the path, away from the forest and toward the safety of the next village. The flashlight beam bobbed with our hurried steps, casting jittery shadows that seemed to dance around us. I resisted the urge to look back, afraid of what I might see, but my partner couldn't help themselves. "He's following us," they whispered. I glanced over my shoulder and my stomach dropped. The figure was indeed walking behind us, maintaining a steady distance. They didn't appear to be in a hurry, but their presence was enough to quicken our pace. The faint glow of streetlights in the next village came into view, a beacon of safety that urged us forward. When we finally reached the village, we stopped under the first street lamp and turned to look back. The figure was gone, but just as relief began to wash over me, the car emerged from the forest. Its headlights cut through the darkness as it slowly crept forward, then abruptly stopped. The driver didn't get out. Instead, the car reversed, retreating back into the shadows of the woods. My partner and I stared in disbelief. The surreal nature of the encounter left us shaken, and we decided to take a much longer route home, avoiding the forest entirely. Our flashlight battery began to fade, and my phone was nearly dead, but I managed to call the police as soon as we got home. I reported everything: the car, the figure, the unnerving silence. But there was one crucial detail I couldn't recall: the license plate number. In my panic, I hadn't thought to memorize it. As I recounted the events to a housemate later that night, they offered a chilling theory. Maybe he was spying on the houses near the forest edge, they suggested. It's easy to see into backyards from up there without being spotted. The idea sent a shiver down my spine. What if he had more sinister intentions? In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The forest, once a place of beauty and tranquility, now felt like a looming threat. I couldn't help but wonder about the figure in the car. Were they connected? And what were they doing in the forest that night? To this day, the memory of that encounter lingers like a dark cloud. The woods hold their secrets, but some mysteries are better left unsolved. One thing is certain: I'll never look at the forest the same way again. With every passing day, the memory of that figure and the eerie encounter in the woods burrowed deeper into my mind. The forest had become a place I actively avoided, yet it haunted my dreams. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only scratched the surface of something much darker and more dangerous. Over time, I began piecing together what little information I could. I revisited the police station to provide more details about the car, though my vague recollection of the incident proved unhelpful. They assured me they'd send someone to patrol the area, but I doubted it would lead to anything. Determined not to let the mystery consume me, I took to researching local legends and folklore surrounding the woods. Strangely, there wasn't much. Most residents treated the forest as an unremarkable part of the village, a place for dog walks and picnics in daylight, nothing more. Yet there was one story, told by an elderly neighbor, that gave me pause. She spoke of an old hermit who once lived deep within the woods, a recluse who'd vanished decades ago under mysterious circumstances. His cabin, she claimed, had long since rotted away, but people occasionally reported hearing faint whispers near its supposed location. Whispers. The very idea sent a shiver down my spine, echoing the sensation I'd felt that night. Could there be a connection? It seemed far-fetched, yet I couldn't dismiss it entirely. The idea of someone, or something, still lingering in the woods, unsettled me more than I cared to admit. One evening, unable to resist the pull any longer, I ventured back to the forest. This time, I went prepared. I brought a stronger flashlight, a fully charged phone, and even a small pocket knife for some semblance of security. My partner refused to join me, insisting I was chasing ghosts. Perhaps I was, but I needed answers. The forest was eerily quiet, as it always seemed to be at night. The crunch of leaves beneath my boots sounded deafening against the silence. I followed the same trail as before, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. Every few steps, I paused to listen, my ears straining for any sign of movement. Nothing. When I reached the clearing where the car had been parked, I found no trace of it. The ground bore no tire marks, no indication that a vehicle had ever been there. Frustrated but not deterred, I continued deeper into the woods. The tree I had photographed loomed ahead, its gnarled branches stark against the night sky. This time, I noticed something I had missed before. Near the base of the tree, partially hidden by fallen leaves, was a small bundle wrapped in fabric. I knelt to examine it, my heart pounding. Inside were items that seemed oddly personal. An old photograph of a family, a rusted locket, and a notebook filled with cryptic scribbles. The handwriting was shaky and uneven, the words almost nonsensical, except for one recurring phrase: "Stay out." A rustle in the underbrush snapped me out of my thoughts. My flashlight beam darted toward the source of the noise, illuminating a pair of glowing eyes reflecting the light. They belonged to a deer, its body frozen in place as it stared back at me. Relief washed over me, though it was short-lived. The deer suddenly bolted, disappearing into the trees. Something had startled it. I stood, clutching the notebook tightly. The air felt heavier, the darkness pressing in around me. A faint sound reached my ears, a low, rhythmic tapping. It seemed to come from deeper within the forest, each tap deliberate and measured. Against my better judgment, I followed the sound, my footsteps hesitant and slow. The tapping led me to another clearing, where I found the source, a tree with a series of marks carved into its trunk. They formed a pattern I couldn't decipher, but it was clear they hadn't been made by nature. Nearby, I spotted a makeshift campsite, long abandoned. The remnants of a fire pit and scattered belongings told a story of someone who'd stayed there, though it was impossible to tell how long ago. As I examined the site, a sense of unease settled over me. The tapping had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. Then, faintly, I heard it. A whisper. It was indistinct, just on the edge of hearing, but it sent a chill down my spine. I swung my flashlight wildly, the beam slicing through the trees. There was no one in sight, yet the whispering grew louder, more insistent. Panic set in. Clutching the notebook and bundle, I turned and ran, my flashlight bobbing wildly as I navigated the trail. The whispers seemed to follow me, echoing in the darkness. By the time I reached the edge of the forest, my chest heaved with exhaustion and fear. Back home, I examined the notebook more closely. The scribbles made no sense, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that they held some significance. One page stood out, bearing a crude drawing of the tree with the carved marks. Beneath it, the words, "They see you," were scrawled in bold, uneven letters. I don't know who they are, but I'm certain of one thing. The forest is no ordinary place. Something lingers there, watching, waiting. and despite my fear, I know I've only begun to uncover its secrets. If you want more chilling tales that will haunt your dreams, don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe to Nightmare Narratives, where every story lingers in the dark. The following morning, despite the bone-deep dread that had gripped me the night before, the forest seemed to call to me. Its quiet, shadowed depths tugged at my curiosity, urging me to return. I couldn't explain why, but I had to know more about the figure, the car, the whispers. I had no illusions of safety, yet something in my gut told me that finding answers was the only way to put the unease to rest. Perhaps I was foolish, perhaps I was haunted, but I needed to understand what I had encountered. Dawn broke with a quiet beauty, the village still wrapped in its pre-dawn hush. I stepped outside, feeling the crispness of the early morning air, the ground wet with dew. The atmosphere was thick, and the gentle hum of life in the village seemed distant, as if the outside world was slowly fading away. The forest, in contrast, stood still, silent and foreboding. Armed with my camera, flashlight, and a small knife, I stepped into the woods once more. The air was damp, the heavy silence oppressive as I walked along the trail, my boots crunching softly on the gravel. The trees, black silhouettes in the fading night, stood tall around me, their branches twisting like fingers pointing to the sky. Every rustle of leaves, every shift in the breeze made me tense. The flashlight illuminated only a small circle of space around me, leaving the rest of the forest bathed in shadows. As I approached the spot where I had seen the car the night before, I could feel my heart rate pick up. The vehicle had vanished, leaving only the disturbed gravel. My breath caught in my chest. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or disappointed, but my mind couldn't rest on that. The forest, with its endless maze of trees, seemed to press in closer. I pressed on, moving past the spot, trying not to listen to the growing weight of my own footsteps. The tree I had photographed the night before loomed ahead, just as eerie now as it had been in the darkness. I circled it slowly, my camera at the ready. As I studied its twisted branches, something glinted in the faint morning light, a strip of bright red tape, fluttering from one of the lower branches. The sudden presence of the tape was enough to stir something within me. My heart skipped a beat as I stepped closer, examining it. The markings on the tape were faint, almost smeared, but they were undeniably strange enough to send a ripple of unease through me. Had it been there the night before? I couldn't recall seeing it. A small, insistent voice in my head urged me to leave, but instead I stepped forward, following the disturbed underbrush, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. I stumbled upon a clearing, smaller than the last, and at its center was something unexpected, a crude hideout. It was barely more than a pile of branches and leaves, the kind of thing you might expect a child to build. But the unease in my stomach didn't lessen. There was something off about it, something too intentional about its construction. Inside the structure, I found a tattered backpack. I opened it, feeling a chill seep into my bones as I sifted through the contents. A flashlight, long dead. A notebook with several pages torn out. As I flipped through the remaining pages, a single phrase stood out, scrawled hastily across the back cover. "Not safe after dark." The words sent a chill up my spine. Something, or someone, had been in this forest, something with a clear warning, and perhaps even a connection to the figure I had encountered. Suddenly a rustle in the bushes caught my attention. My flashlight flickered nervously, revealing only a deer standing motionless in the underbrush. I let out a breath, trying to calm myself, but the deer suddenly bolted, disappearing into the trees. Something had startled it. With the hair on the back of my neck standing on end, I turned and left the clearing. The whisper seemed to follow me, growing faint but louder, like distant voices murmuring in a language I couldn't understand. I broke into a hurried walk, my feet pounding the trail as the air around me grew heavier with each step. My heart raced, the fear that had been lurking just beneath the surface now bubbling over into panic. By the time I reached the edge of the forest, I felt as though I had barely escaped something far worse than my imagination had conjured. Back home, I locked myself in and examined the notebook more closely. The scribbles made no sense, yet I couldn't ignore the feeling that they were a clue. There was a sense of urgency in those scribbled words. Not safe after dark. I shuddered at the thought that something was waiting for me, something far darker than I could comprehend. That night, I lay awake, my thoughts whirling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the figure in the woods. I saw the red tape. I saw the whispered warning in the notebook, and with every passing minute, the forest called to me once again, its secrets beckoning, its dangers closer than I could ever understand. Dare to face the nightmare? Hit that like button, leave a comment, share the fear, and subscribe to Nightmare Narratives, where terror awaits around every corner. The day after I'd left the forest, the images of the strange creature and the unnerving events from the night before kept replaying in my mind. Sleep felt like an impossible luxury. My mind was clouded with the thoughts of what I had seen, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. Each shadow in my room seemed to grow longer. Each creak of the house made my heart beat faster. I knew that I needed to return to the forest. Despite the dread clawing at me, there was a pull, an undeniable urge to go back. I could sense that the mystery wasn't finished, that it had only just begun. What had I really seen out there? Was it real, or had my mind been playing tricks on me? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had no choice. I had to uncover the truth. But fear gnawed at me, the kind of fear that made every part of me scream, "Don't go back." I didn't want to return, but curiosity was stronger than my dread. I couldn't stop wondering about the strange creature I'd glimpsed between the trees. Was it a figment of my imagination, or was there something out there that defied logic and reason? The sun had just started to rise when I packed my backpack and set off. The air was cool, and the first light of dawn broke through the trees like a warm golden veil. But I felt no peace. My heart beat erratically in my chest, and every step felt heavier than the last. The forest was eerily silent, as if holding its breath, watching me, waiting. When I arrived at the spot I had visited the previous night, everything seemed different. The trees, the ground, the air. It was all the same, but somehow not. The strange sensation of being watched intensified. I scanned the area, hoping to see nothing, praying for it to be an ordinary day. But something in the air told me it wouldn't be. I remembered the footprint I had discovered, and my thoughts immediately rushed back to that first eerie moment. My camera was still hanging from my neck, but this time I didn't feel as confident as I had before. I approached the spot slowly, each step calculated, the feeling of danger creeping up my spine. The ground, however, was no longer disturbed. There was no sign of the strange mark I had seen last time. For a moment I was relieved, but it was short-lived. As I looked deeper into the forest, something caught my eye, a flicker of movement, just a flash, but enough to send a chill down my spine. I wasn't imagining things. Something was there. Something was watching me. I crept forward, trying to be as quiet as possible, every nerve on edge. The trees seemed to close in on me, the shadows shifting with every breeze, as though the forest itself was alive. I felt the weight of each step, as though the earth beneath me was sinking. Then, I heard it. A rustling sound, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to pinpoint where it was coming from. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my feet remained rooted to the ground. I couldn't look away. From the underbrush, a figure stepped into view. It was tall, thin, almost unnaturally so. Its skin was the color of the forest floor, blending in seamlessly with its surroundings. But there was something wrong about it. Its movements were jerky, like it wasn't quite in sync with the world around it. Its eyes, two glowing orbs, fixed on me. I felt my pulse quicken as I stared into those eyes, unable to look away. I wanted to scream, to turn and flee, but my body wouldn't respond. It was as if I were frozen in place, trapped by the very thing that terrified me. The creature didn't move at first. It just watched me, as if assessing my every movement. Its gaze was unsettlingly intelligent, and the longer I stared, the more I felt like it was reading my thoughts. Then, it spoke. Its voice wasn't like anything I had ever heard before. It wasn't human, but it was clear, almost melodic. "You're not meant to be here," it said, its words sending a shiver down my spine. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My body was still paralyzed by fear. The creature took a step forward, its limbs stretching unnaturally long. "Leave," it said again, its tone becoming more insistent. I wanted to run, but my feet remained glued to the ground. Everything in me screamed to escape, but I couldn't move. Time seemed to stretch, each second feeling like an eternity. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature turned and disappeared back into the forest, vanishing into the shadows as though it had never been there at all. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my legs shaking beneath me. I didn't know what to make of what had just happened. Had it been real? Was I losing my mind? I tried to steady myself, reminding myself that I needed to document everything. I fumbled with my camera, my hands trembling as I raised it to capture the scene. But there was nothing. The forest was quiet, still, as if nothing had happened at all. I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was hiding something that wasn't meant to be found, and now it seemed it had decided to show itself to me. But why? The mystery deepened. I knew I had to go deeper to uncover the truth. But a voice inside me, a whisper that was impossible to ignore, warned me that I was getting too close to something dark, something dangerous. Don't let the darkness consume you alone. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to Nightmare Narratives. Experience the fear firsthand and join the family now.